You're listening to the Journey Podcast. The Journey is a ministry of Southcrest Baptist Church for those in college or college-aged. We hope this podcast helps you find your greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus. Hey guys, welcome back to the Journey Podcast. Man, we hope that you guys have been enjoying these episodes as much as we've been enjoying creating them. My name's Tyler. I'm the Journey pastor, and with us again, David Maddox, the worship pastor here at Southcrest. And man, we're excited just to kind of jump into this and talk a little bit about a subject that I think we probably have kind of an idea of, but I don't know that we necessarily think about or verbalize very often. And it's the subject of why do we need the church? And I want us to kind of think about this from the context, especially of a college student who's come to, maybe a brand new city for the very first time. They've had a home church for the past 16, 17 years. And now they're in a brand new place and they're being tasked for the very first time of finding a church, right? And so asking the question, why does this college student need the church? And then ultimately, why do we all need the church, right? So David, I just want to ask you that question, why do we need the church?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I just to dive right in, I think the first thing that comes to mind is we need to be reminded of truth, of what is truth? Because even the gospel, I think a lot of times we ask, what is the gospel? We talk about sharing the gospel, but I've seen in a lot of cases, and even in my own life, where when I actually step back and think, okay, I'm going to share the gospel, I start tripping up, right? Which is it's so core to my life that I should be able to just tell you about Jesus and what he's done for me and the hope that I have through him, through his blood. But we get all tripped up. So we need to be reminded constantly, what is truth? Reminded of the gospel, of who God is and who we are, what our condition is as humans on this fallen, broken earth. And again, just the hope that we have in Jesus. But another aspect of church that's so important is helping each other and encouraging each other through trials. Right? We go through really difficult things in this life, again, because of the fall. And a lot of those things, it feels like there's just no hope, right? But because of church, we can remind each other and help each other through these trials. And that reminds me of Psalm 90, verse 1, that says, Lord, you have been a refuge in every generation, right? That we can trust in his promise, and then we can trust in his goodness through trials, through every generation, through all of time. And of course, right, what's already kind of implied through those is that we have relationships, we have community, people that care for us in church, and people that can help us stay accountable. It's so important that we confess sin and that we don't let sin live in the dark and grow, that we bring it out into the light. And Proverbs 12:1 says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but one who hates correction is stupid, right? So it's so important that we're in community with people who can hold us accountable and care for us even when we fail.
Otherwise, you're a dummy.
That's right. You're stupid, right? It's literally what it says.
Well, I'm thinking too about the college student that, maybe comes to church, but really just comes and then leaves. You know what I'm saying? And so here's kind of my thoughts and maybe where I want to even go with this. Because all those things that you said, right? You need the gospel. You need accountability, right? I think the average college student, especially ones that I meet that maybe are quote unquote Christians, when they come to school, they get involved not necessarily in church, but on campus Christian ministries, and they're like, well, I can find all of that in this community. I don't necessarily need to go to church to find that. How would you respond to them?
Yeah. Well, first, like, I hear that argument. And even I remember when I was in high school and going through college, such a challenge for so many college students. So like, I feel that challenge of like, yeah, but why do I actually need to attend a church? Like, I can find all these things you're talking about in church. And so we need to go to God's word, right? I think is what's important. And like, is it true that we can find all of these things that we need in a church, outside of an actual church organization? So let's look at this passage in Hebrews. So this is Hebrews 10, verses 23 through 25. And it says, let us hold to the confession of our hope without wavering, since he who promised is faithful. And let us watch out for one another to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other, and all the more as you see that day approaching. So right, it's important for us to gather as a church, and right, small groups like outside of church organization are good. They're helpful things, but right, like in this passage in Hebrews and in other places, right, like it's emphasized that we're not to neglect the gathering of the believers, and I haven't spent a lot of time looking into this passage, but I know I've seen a lot of commentaries like assume this is talking about like your local church organization coming together. So, I read an article in preparation for this topic that I thought was really awesome, and maybe can help help clarify this issue. He talks about 5 different groups of people that might attend church. And the first few of these, I think, are a large reason why, as college students and just people in general, that we struggle with the large organized gathering of church. And so let me just kind of unwrap these groups that he's talking about in the article. It's really great. So the Gospel Coalition, Trevin Wax, he outlines the first group. He says they're the regulars, right? So I think the regulars are a big turnoff for college students often, right? It's people that have just always gone to church, right? So if you grew up in church and then you are a Christian, but you moved off to college and you grew up just being told, this is what we do. We go to church on Sunday mornings. It's challenging because, right, you're living your own life, right? You're in charge. You have so much more authority over your own life now that you're out of your parents' home, that you're asking those big questions like, they just went, like, am I really just going to go to church because my parents went to church? Like, yeah. And so that's a substantial group in the church, the regulars. And then there's the responsibles that he talks about. And these are people that have, right, they have responsibilities on Sunday morning. And so like I grew up in a pastor's home, and I felt this growing up, right? Where it was just like, hey, you have something, nobody else is going to do it if you don't do it. And so it's a job you have to do. You got to be responsible, go do your job, and do the thing at church that you've committed to do. I mean, it's certainly good to follow through on our commitments, right? But it's like, that's a little bit of a turnoff too, right? It's like, that feels a little disingenuous, right? Like I'm just going because it's a job I'm supposed to do. And then you have the respectables. And I want to talk a little bit more about the respectables, because I think this is a really significant issue in the church right now. And the respectables are people that are going to church because they believe that the moral, the traditional, conservative, moral teachings of the church are necessary for being successful in life. Okay, so what's interesting about this group of people, this way of thinking, is that they're so close, right? Like there are some aspects of truth in what these people are believing in practice, right? But this is such a common reality right now, and in fact, there's a lot of prominent, especially on the kind of even political or like socially conservative side, like of the world right now, leaders right now, influencers even, that are teaching that traditional values are what you need to, like they're healthy for a society. And that's true. Like they are, but that's really where it ends, right? Like Jesus is not really in the picture. And I even think maybe I've heard you someone reference this recently about, was it Richard Dawkins that said just recently that he's a famous secular atheist, right? And said that he, I'm misquoting him, so y'all look this up to find the exact quote, right? But like basically said that he regrets our American culture moving towards a secularist worldview, right? Because he even as a secular atheist sees the value in our country being rooted in Christian like morals and values, which is wild. And so it's just interesting. This group is devoted to values, but just for the purpose of being moral, right? And so another common thing in this group is parents that send their kids to church because we just want to make sure they don't turn out into some wild progressive or something like that, right? So like there's these things that are like true and helpful, but like you're missing the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And then you also have the reachers, and the reachers are a small group of people, he says in the article, but these are people that are they're searching, they're asking the right questions, but they're maybe not Christians yet. And then the last group, and y'all, this is who we want to be. Like this is, if reading that passage in Hebrews isn't enough for you, let this be what convinces you, right? Like listen into this. He says, the resolute. I'm just going to read this quote about the resolute. He said, the resolute gather with believers because they love Jesus and his people, because the New Testament commands it, like we saw in Hebrews 10, because they long to hear God's word preached, because they yearn to meet Christ at the table, because they need the God-centered reorientation that worship can provide, because they cannot conceive rightly of a life following Jesus that doesn't include his bride, because they know the family of God is essential, not optional, for spiritual formation. And man, that hit me hard, right? It was just gosh, like that's who I want to be. I don't want to be somebody that just goes because I've always gone, or because I got a task to fulfill, or because the morals of the church are helpful in formation of adolescence. I want to go because of that quote right there, because I need the church for those reasons. So
yeah, no, man, that's really good. And I think ultimately it boils down to this idea that, man, why do we go to church? Because Jesus created it, and he died for the church.
Yeah.
And so we gather together with local believers to be encouraged, to kind of reorient ourselves and our lives. Maybe for the week, we celebrate what God has done, and we get excited for what God is doing in the lives of other believers. So yeah, man, that's really good. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, we're almost out of time. And so, man, we want to thank you guys so much for just, again, listening to this podcast. We want to let you know, be paying attention to our Instagram account, because very soon you're going to see on there, we want to hear from you guys. What is it that you want to hear us talk about? What are some topics, some issues that you would like for us to discuss? We're always open to that. But man, we're super thankful for you, and just excited for what God is doing in the life of the college students in the Journey and the college students in Lubbock, Texas. It's pretty amazing to watch. But we love you guys, and we'll see you next time. You are sent.